Today is the first Friday in November, and that means it's time now for our First Fridays feature. Today featuring Classical Revolution Cleveland, now to the KeyBank studio in the Idea Center at Playhouse Square, and WCLV's Angela Mitchell.
Thanks so much, Mark. We are indeed live on WCLV, and for the first time, we are streaming video of the program via Periscope. So if you want to watch us, go to periscope.tv/WCLV1049, and you can watch the entire program. You'll also find a link to that at WCLV.org. There are 9 musicians with me in the KeyBank studio right now, 6 cellists, 2 pianists, and a violinist. They're all part of Classical Revolution Cleveland, a collective of young musicians who live and work in Northeast Ohio. Welcome, everyone.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Ariel Clayton Karas is the director of Classical Revolution Cleveland. Ariel, thanks so much for being here and bringing your group.
Thank you so much for having us.
So I think what kind of sets CRC apart is the way that you share classical music in different venues besides just a typical concert venue. What are some of the places that CRC performs at?
Yeah, so we're all classically trained, so we've all had our fair share of experience on great concert hall and recital stages, but we do a monthly show at the Happy Dog, the West Side Happy Dog, now that there's 2, at 5801 Detroit, every third Tuesday. And with the exception of 1 month this year, we have been there every month for the last 5 years, starting our anniversary show will be in December this year. So it's really been exciting to have a home base. And then we do lots of other things around town, different cultural festivals, and you can find us in some different locations.
And this is part of a national movement, isn't it, called Classical Revolution?
Yes, and it started in San Francisco several years ago, and it's in New York now. I know they've got a great classical rev in Boston, Detroit, and even in Dallas and in other major cities. It might not always be called Classical Revolution, but the idea of bringing classical music to unfamiliar venues is there.
So when Classical Revolution started out 5 years ago, what did it look like then compared to what you have going on now?
Well, we had a couple of different venues at that time as well. They're really great places. Prosperity Social Club in Tremont was one of the first spots, and we would actually just show up and sight read there. We weren't really planning a firm set list or anything like that. And then we were doing monthly shows at the Barking Spider, which is on the campus of Case Western. We did once a month on Sundays. And we were also doing Happy Dog. We started December of 2009, and that sort of shifted to be our main sort of primary location a couple of years ago. And it's a little bit more program now where instead of just winging it every night, we wing it enough in our lives. And even on stage, we'll sight read and read through things, but we do kind of plan it out now. And it's so much fun, though.
And do you just play classical music, or are you delving into other genres?
Primarily classical because we are classically trained, but for instance, our next show is Tuesday, November 17th at the Happy Dog, and we just programmed a shakuhachi player, which is a form of Japanese flute, doing sort of Zen Buddhist music, and that's going to be really interesting. We've never had that. We've even had trepanning trio before. They do folk instruments and instruments from other cultures. So we try to branch out, but there's nothing wrong with having Bach and Beethoven with your beer as well. So we do always have classical.
Absolutely. Well, we'll start off the hour with some music by Gabriel Fauré. We'll hear the first movement from Fauré's piano trio in D minor, the Allegro ma non troppo. On the violin is Ariel Clayton Karas, on cello, Andris Koh, and at the piano, Lorenzo Salvagni. This is First Fridays on WCLV. live on WCLV's First Fridays. That was Gabriel Fauré's Piano Trio in D minor. The first movement, Allegro ma non troppo. We heard three of the members of Classical Revolution Cleveland: violinist Ariel Clayton Karas, who's also the director of the group, cellist Andris Koh, and pianist Lorenzo Salvagni. When you play a show at like the Happy Dog, I've been to some of these shows. They are great fun. What kind of feedback do you get from the audience? Both, you probably get some non-classical musician fans in there, and some classical people as well. What kind of feedback do you get?
Well, one of my favorite things to see every month are the faces of the non-musicians that are regulars. So both people our age, friends of mine or personal friends of ours, obviously, will love to come. But there are sort of even of a generation older than ours who they plan, they come, they have their bottle of wine, and they sit back and get to watch, musicians do Bach and Mozart every month. So one of my favorites is the non-musicians that love it. They come back every month from all sorts of generations. So
do they have the same experience if they go to Severance Hall? Like, do they experience the music differently, I should say, in a place like the Happy Dog than Severance?
Well, I think anytime you take the formality out of it, it's immediately more accessible. But that's not to say that what the Cleveland Orchestra does or the amazing other ensembles in our city aren't accessible. They're just accessible in a different way. And there is something really special when this July we had, I think, 12 or 15 student performers at like a pre-show for Classical Rev. And they were anywhere from like 5 to 15. And they stayed for the show afterwards. And so getting to sort of be on stage and then be in close contact with their teachers who are then on stage right after them in like a really casual setting, it just makes it all more relaxed and I think a little easier to connect sometimes.
We'll have another piece from our piano trio here. This is by Paul Schoenfeld. He was inspired to write, it's called Cafe Music, and he was inspired by hearing the house trio at Murray's Steakhouse in Minneapolis. I've actually been there. That's really cool. And he called it like high-class dinner music. And we'll hear just one of the movements from Cafe Music by Paul Schoenfeld. Again, we have violinist Ariel Clayton Karas, cellist Andris Koh, pianist Lorenzo Salvagni, all members of Classical Revolution Cleveland, live on WCLV. A movement from Cafe Music by Paul Schoenfeld. I'm Angela Mitchell, and you're listening to First Fridays on WCLV Classical 104.9. I'm with 9 of the members of Classical Revolution Cleveland here in the KeyBank studio at the Idea Center at Playhouse Square. We'll have more from Classical Revolution Cleveland coming up after a few messages. WC's Cello Sonata and music by Richard Wagner and Wilhelm Fitzenhagen. That's all coming up on First Fridays.